Hello again, Niner Faithful, and welcome into the JFA podcast. Today is Monday, February 5th, and so this means that by this time next week, we may be celebrating a sixth Lombardi trophy. So today we'll discuss the Kansas City defense and which version of Coach Shanahan do we need this week. All this and more, you're inside the Johnny Dell Football Academy. Welcome to the Johnny Dell Football Academy podcast on the channel that's trying to answer the whys and hows of the game by talking through and dissecting game film and trying to explain why the X's zig and the O's zag. I am Adam Marino, reminding you, as always, the most fun way to watch is on YouTube, where we go live and you can comment in to the live show. So be sure you are part of the conversation by hitting the notification bell, turning on all of your notifications. We also stream live on Facebook and X, and the audio versions can always be found on the usual suspects: Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts. Now, remember, if you are live with us in the chat, it's probably because you've hit the notification bell. So when you show this channel to your friends and family, be sure that they are aware to hit the notification so they can join in the fun. Speaking of fun, the way we boost the algorithm live is what so many of you, like Dr. Steve Brule, of course, Marco C, Paul Pendleton, Jim Cushman. Thank you to everyone. Hashtag JD49 is what we're looking for to boost the algorithm. I have so much nervous energy as I've already fumbled about 6 words in this beginning here. I am just so excited. It is Super Bowl week. I watched part of the god awful Pro Bowl. It was awful, and I am just ready for the true Super Bowl week. Johnny, how are you feeling? You're back from the Senior Bowl. I know you're diving into film. We're going to get into it. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty well. I'm at that point in the week where I start to get really stressed if I'm going to get all the film work in before and be able to put together a video for the faithful and everybody previewing the upcoming game
Right.
early enough. There's a lot of film to dive through. I've watched 4 games from the Kansas City defense. And so that's kind of where this idea of the show came from. I had an interesting conversation with somebody last night. And so we'll kind of go into that a little bit. I didn't watch any of the Pro Bowl stuff yesterday because, well, guess what? The 49ers weren't playing in the Pro Bowl. There's nobody playing in the Pro Bowl, and it was flag football. I mean, come on.
Right.
I might go back and watch some of the skills challenge. I think those are usually fun, but if I wanted to watch flag football, I'd go
Yeah.
watch a bunch of 5th graders play or
I would
something. I
coach your
mean, this
kid.
is
Like,
this is ridiculous.
yeah.
Now I am interested to see how the flag football in the Olympics goes. I can't wait to see George Kittle lined up across from some elementary school teacher from Germany. That'd be amazing.
Some elementary.
So, but it's Super Bowl week. We're here. This is what we wait all season for this week, this game. It's what everybody's trying to do, where everybody's trying to get to. It's where we felt we should have been last year. And we went into last year's game. I don't know about everybody else, but I had very conflicted feelings in last year's Super Bowl game, sitting there watching the Chiefs, who had ripped out our hearts in 2019.
Yeah.
And you don't want them to win. But then the Eagles,
Ugh.
who were the Eagles and their fans were horrible and trash and everything after that NFC Championship game. You didn't want them to win.
You don't want to
So
give them
somebody had
bragging
to
rights.
win,
Yeah.
right? So um now we're one of the last 2 teams left. And we've talked about it all season, Adam, that this is a special season, that you do not get a lot of Super Bowl chances. This is now the 3rd in the last 12 years, 13 or 11 years, excuse me. We've been fortunate. There's a lot of teams like the Lions who have never seen their team in a Super Bowl. Never. Not once. not in a Super Bowl ever. And so we talked about. I think I talked about it with Steph after the game, the NFC Championship game. She was like, Lions fans, give them credit. They really showed out for the road for the NFC Championship game. I said, yeah, because it was a once in a lifetime opportunity, and probably,
Right.
if you're 40 years old, this may not ever happen again in your lifetime. So, uh, they had to take advantage of it while it was there. But we've been a fortunate franchise in one sense. We've also been a franchise that we start to know what the Bills franchise felt like in the early 90s. Team that you get there and you can't close the deal. So, there's so many storylines this week, from Brock Purdy being the last pick in the draft. And I mean, people wanted to talk about Mahomes feeling slighted and passed on. He ain't got nothing on Brock Purdy. Literally every team passed on every single one of their draft picks except for the 49ers
Yeah.
to bring him in.
And we passed quite a few times, if
Yeah,
we're
we
honest.
we had like 10 picks before him. So
Yeah.
this is wild. Which, Peter King had a great story on with Kyle Shanahan about the drafting of Brock Purdy, that really it was a lot of John York sitting there and saying, he asked him as they were coming down to the end, and you had all these different position coaches saying, I can't believe this guy's still available. This guy's going to be a dude, and I can't believe he's there. We're going to get a chance to get him, and all this stuff. And John York looked at Kyle Shanahan, he said, "Well, who's the best player available right now? You're coming up to the last pick in the draft. Who's the best player available?" And he said, Kyle looked at him and he said, "Well, I have no doubt, without a doubt, Brock Purdy's the best player left. Well, I have a 4th round grade on him." And so York said he said they were sitting there and they're going, but we might be able to get him in as an undrafted free agent, and get him on a really cheap contract, and we can get him this and this and that, and we can get this guy. And he said John York was just staring at him in disbelief, going, "If he's the best guy available, why is this even a conversation?"
Just go get him.
Yeah, it's the last pick. You go get the best player available, no matter what. And, so hey, hats off to John York. We've bagged on John York for a long time, and there was some reasonable reasons why. But hey, give him credit there for having Kyle's back and pushing him to draft Brock Purdy. I mean, that changed this franchise. So you got all these great storylines with that, and going again in here, I think we have this idea that the Chiefs are this offensive juggernaut and everything. And Greg Gonzo, no, it was not Jed York, it was John York. He said Dr. John York in the article. So yeah, John York was sitting there. That's Jed's dad, and so it was a really interesting piece. Go read it, check it out. It was on NBC Sports. Peter King, he had a conversation with Kyle as he drove into work with him. So yeah,
That's awesome.
really interesting. A lot of great storylines this week, and all of them are going to be around our 49ers. We get to watch the teams, brought out with the great fanfare tonight.
Yeah.
I mean,
Interviews.
if you're a fan, like, this is the greatest week. If you're a fan with your team in the Super Bowl, this is the greatest week of football you can ask for,
Yeah.
because you get to see everything is about just you and one other team. Because after the Super Bowl, you get 2 days of coverage about how your team just won the Super Bowl and how they're great and how they're amazing, and then everything moves on to the draft.
Yep.
So but this week you will have more coverage on your team than anything. And so this is the greatest week of football for a fan.
Yeah, love it. And speaking of John York, I did see the interview with his son, as I'm sure many of you did, when he said, "Man, in training camp that year with Brock Purdy, it's never a good thing totally when the head coach says, 'Hey, we need to talk.'" So I was like, "Okay, what's going on?" He said, "I think we have the best quarterback in the quarterback room is probably our third string guy." And that's just a cool story, that talking about Brock Purdy from the get-go, that he was just that moxie, and just you knew that he was going to be someone special in our organization, and so far has more than lived up to I mean, there's nothing more that he could have done when you say he broke the all-time franchise record for most yards, passing yards in a season, and took his team undefeated into that NFC Championship game. I mean, he was undefeated up to that point. There's literally nothing better that you can do, and then got injured. They lost. Then going into this season, all he did was take the team under his wings to the Super Bowl. So I thought that was cool. That interview is going around on Instagram Reels and all that. I'm sure many of you saw that as well. The other cool video going around, I wanted to bring up a couple of them, were George Kittle, um, you know, not not feeling the greatest during the last Super Bowl, saying, just pacing, saying, "I will be back. I will be back. I will be back." And then against the Lions, Trent Williams, who was not a part of that team, came up to him, and I just think it's cool that these guys know each other so well. As far as Trent wasn't a part of that team, so for him to know that George said that, I don't know if every other offensive tackle on random other teams know that, but Trent Williams is his guy now, and so he said, "George, you're getting back there just like you said you were. We're going, baby. You're getting back there." Like, just what a cool moment that is. And you talk about this week with interviews. Is there no better interviewer than George Kittle? I mean, even the gifs that are made where he's looking at Skycam or whatever you want to call that, the camera up top during a game, and he's like, he's just waving and laughing. Like, it's just, he's such a character, and we love that as Niner fans. And so we'll be watching these interviews where they're going to have an interview with George Kittle, and Juice will walk by and give him a high five, and they'll start laughing, or vice versa, or all this stuff, like the camaraderie of the team and how loose they'll be uh during these interviews until it's crunch time. It's just like you said, the best week for us fans, because we see these things, and we feel like we know them, because these stories that I'm talking about, I'm not breaking news. This show doesn't break news. We talk about it, and we break down film, and it's just awesome because we feel like we know these guys. We know Debo. We know, like, we feel like we personally know them because we're so engulfed, and we know all the stories and all that. So it's just going to be so fun to watch this week unfold. One thing I want to get into then is regarding this week and how you dissected the film on Kansas City, and I want to talk defense, because a lot of my friends here in Indiana are asking me, "Well, what do you think about the game? We know you're into the Niners. What do you think?" And I definitely think that it's our offense versus their defense, because truly no one can stop our offense when we are clicking. When Brendel hits his block, when Debo makes the right cut on a route, when if we don't shoot ourselves in the foot, there's not a team in the NFL, whether it's a German teacher playing flag football or an NFL team, no one can stop us, right? So, what do you see in Kansas City defense? And let's talk a little bit about that.
Well, so first of all, kind of going back to what you were talking about, I think there's what I love about this week and how it's shaping up is that, this is where NFL legends are born and made. I mean, this is where guys go from being great players, and you talk about them being a great player, to being a legend of the game. You have a guy like Jim Kelly, who was a great player. Great player. Joe Montana was a legend. They went to the same amount of Super Bowls. There's a, it changes. Or excuse me, Jim Kelly went to one less Super Bowl. But I mean, Jim Kelly went to 3 Super Bowls, and Joe Montana went to 4. That's the difference between a great player and a legend. And we have a lot of great players on this team that have a chance to become legends. You have a Christian McCaffrey, who's a great player. You get that Super Bowl win, you go from being a great player to being a Terrell Davis and a legend. You have George Kittle, who's a great player. You have a chance to go and win a Super Bowl and be in the same conversation in 49ers history as Dwight Clark. You have Trent Williams, who's a great player. and he has a chance to go and be a Super Bowl champion that he's never done. He has never been in this game. As great of a player as he is, he's never been in this game. As great of a player as Christian McCaffrey is, he's never been in this game. You have a chance for Brock Purdy as the third youngest starting quarterback in Super Bowl history, who was the last pick in the draft, to go win a Super Bowl against the guy that everybody's saying this is his era. I mean, it's been talked about. This is the Mahomes era, just like the Brady era was the Brady era. You have a chance for the last pick in the draft to go win a Super Bowl against the guy whose era you are currently in. You have Kyle Shanahan has a chance to go up against one of the greatest head coaches of all time in Andy Reid, who's won 2 Super Bowls now and gets to cement his legacy with his dad as a legend in the game. I mean, this is the greatest thing in football we have. This is where you have great players become legends, and you have, the ability to etch your name in the annals of football history, where this game will never be forgotten. This is something special. But as I've dove into film, I think one thing we've felt this year, and I think this is the Mahomes and Reed effect from the last 5 years, is that we have this idea that Kansas City is they have that scary offense. They have Mahomes, and it's how do you contain them? How do you match up against them? How do you match points with them? Because man, that's going to be so hard. And they can put up points on you, and they can do all these things. Well, they've kind of sneakily become one of the best defensive teams in the league. Their defense is not talked about in the same vein as the Jets and the Ravens and the Browns, but they are just as good as all of those defenses. Their defense is outstanding. I
And
think
they're
people
hot.
started to think,
They're really hot.
not just being hot, like they've been doing it all year. People just haven't noticed as much. If you look at their regular season, they had one game all season where they allowed more than 24 points.
Yeah.
I mean, let's actually stop and think about that. The vast majority of their games, teams were held to 24 or fewer points. And people always think, okay, yeah, this is just that's when their offense is everything, and teams, they don't get a chance to touch the ball. No, their offense is not having great time of possession. They're not converting a ton of first downs. They're not putting up all these points. No, their defense has been really solid. I mean, you want to talk about going through the numbers. I was going through the numbers this morning. Kansas City is the number 2 scoring defense in the league. They allowed 4 fewer points on the season than San Francisco's defense. They were number 2 behind Baltimore. Number 2 scoring defense in the league. They are number 5 in yards per play. And they do this while being the 27th team in takeaways. This isn't because they're intercepting everybody, they're forcing fumbles. They are literally one of the worst teams at taking the ball away, and they're still allowing the second fewest points. They're allowing the 5th fewest yards per play. They are 3rd in first downs allowed. They are 4th in passing first downs allowed. They are tied for 4th in passing touchdowns allowed. They are 3rd in net yards per attempt. They are 6th in first. They are 5th in rushing touchdowns allowed. This is a very solid defense, very good defense. And people always say, well, they have a weakness against the run. They have a weakness against the run. I'm not sure what rushing metrics people are always looking at. They're 18th in rushing yards allowed. They're not a terrible rushing defense. And when I watched the film, I will tell you, I was expecting to put it on and see a lot of this stuff where you were expecting to see them, just be open against the run, and I did not. It was actually I was getting a little concerned watching all the film of their defense and seeing that they were not nearly as susceptible against a run as it's, I think, being made out to be. One thing you have to remember is that because they are so good against the pass, that because they're fourth in the league. They only allowed just over 3,000 yards passing on the season. That's a big deal. They're so hard to pass against that teams have to run on them. And they're so good on third and obvious passing situations. You have to stay ahead of the schedule. So you have to run on first and second down on them. You have to. They are so good. If you get into second and long, third and long, just book it. You're punting. That's best case scenario, because they are so good in those situations. So, and I know their DVOA on run D hasn't been as good, but I'll tell you, they're 25th in yards per attempt allowed rushing. That's where it's the one thing. But what you also see is they give up. It's kind of skewed in some ways, because you have they give up a lot of explosive runs. So the Las Vegas Raiders game would be a perfect example. They gave up something, it was like 95 yards rushing on around 26 attempts through the first 57 minutes of that game. And that game was a one-score game, and the Raiders got the ball deep in their own territory, and they broke off like a 50 or 60-yard run, where they got through, broke one tackle, and the guy took it for a big gain. And then the next play, they ran for another 15, 16 yards. So they gave up back-to-back explosive plays, and that sealed the game. That was what ended the game. But, and so you look at the stat line, and it says, well, they gave up 158 yards rushing on 29 attempts, because I think they kneeled it twice there at the end. That they gave up all these rushing yards, but you look at it, and actually for the first 57 minutes of the game, there was a lot of ugly runs. I mean, ugly runs. That's what was surprising about that Las Vegas game, was that, people say, well, yeah, they were still averaging 4 yards per attempt. That's still pretty good. You go, no, no, no. What you don't understand is Las Vegas, for every 6-yard run they got, that means they were getting a 2-yard run. So yeah, you may get a 6-yard run on 2nd and 10. You're still facing 3rd and 4 versus them. That's how it went. And so, it'd be a 2-yard run, a 3-yard run, and then they're faced with 3rd and 5, and they would stop Las Vegas. Las Vegas would punt. Then they'd come out, they'd run it on first down. They'd get 6 yards. It'd be 2nd and 4, and then they try and drop back and pass. And Aiden O'Connell is having an unblocked free rusher coming at him, and he's either getting sacked, or he's it's an incomplete pass. And suddenly it's still now 3rd and 4, and they would stop them on 3rd down, and they're punting. So, they're averaging 4 yards a carry on that first drive, or in those 2 drives. It sounds great, but they're punting twice. And, this is what can happen with Kansas City. Now, I will say one storyline that hasn't been talked about, and I put it on Twitter, that I think has been way overlooked, was the injury to Derek Nnadi. He was a guy I was watching film, and this number 91 kept popping, big time run defender, just flashed on film. Chris Jones will flash. He's a guy it's hard not to notice, because he's so disruptive, and he's so quick, and he slices through. Derek Nnadi was a guy who, if they one gapped him, nobody could dislodge him from his gap. And Spagnuolo runs so many different fronts. I mean, there are so many different fronts. And so you'll come out one play, and it's going to be all one gap stuff. So every guy has one gap, and you got to dislodge from one gap, and you got to pick up a guy from the other, and you kind of, split the thing open, and you can run. And then they come out the next play, and they're running a 3-4, and they have all of their defensive tackles 2 gapping. And you're going, what in the world is this? And Derek Nnadi was a guy that, when you talk about, like, I wanted to pull several of Derek Nnadi's tips or clips as teaching tape for 2 gapping as a defensive tackle. It was so good. And he would ride that guard, and he'd keep his head to the outside. And the moment he saw that running back cut, he'd disengage, shed, and make the tackle. And I mean, he was a force in the run game. So I was sitting there, I'm like, number 91, who is this guy? And I went to the Chiefs roster page, and sorted by number, and there's no 91 listed. I'm going, who is it? That they didn't cut this guy, surely, because it looked like he had a captain logo on his jersey, but I couldn't tell for sure. And so then I scrolled all the way to the bottom, and it said injured reserve, and Derek Nnadi was there. So I quick Google search on Derek Nnadi and injury update, found out he had a triceps injury in the divisional game, and he's been on injury reserve. He's not playing in the Super Bowl. Everybody talks about Charles Omenihu, which is a big loss for them in the passing game side. And he
Right.
also was doing a good job as kind of DN, kind of outside linebacker, setting the edge. But if you want to talk about run stuffer, Derek Nnadi was that guy. Like, he was the guy who kept their linebackers clean. I think that's a much bigger loss than anybody's realizing. And it kind of also puts even more shame on Monken's head for not running the ball more against Kansas City.
Right, right. A couple chats to get to as Lisa, one of our favorites, of course, says Brock to Mahomes will be Eli to Tom. Speak it into existence. Let's go Niners. And yeah, I was thinking that when you said that with just dynasties and Brady and losing twice to Eli, of course, and then Mahomes and this new era, and if Brock Purdy can take him down. So yes, Lisa, thank you for the super chat. There was one other comment here that I wanted to get your take on, Johnny. It was from, let me scroll. It was regarding when Steve Wilkes was coaching in Arizona, and I'm looking for the comment, but
Yeah, I saw that one.
I
That
got
goes along with
5
something.
sacks.
Yeah, that goes along with something. I put that on Twitter. So I said, and it's actually gotten a lot of traction. It was just something I was sitting there and kind of thinking about, because I'd seen that and went back and looked it up. And yeah, it was 2018. Kansas City played Arizona. Steve Wilkes was the head coach, and Arizona won that game 26-14. I had some jackhole of a Chiefs fan come at me on that one, telling me I was wrong about all sorts of stuff, because I typoed and said it was 28-16.
Yeah, yeah.
But
It was the great Gonzo. He
yeah,
said
it was his comment.
that's his who
I
said it. Yeah.
um but we've talked all season about how, man, Steve Wilkes ain't Miko, man. He ain't D'Amico. And he ain't solid. Like, this just ain't it. This just ain't. I've heard that so much this season. And look, after the first half of last game, I was ready for Steve Wilkes to go too. But let's kind of take a trip down memory lane and realize that the last time D'Amico Ryans led a 49ers defense against Patrick Mahomes had 6 straight touchdown drives on him and put up 42 points on his defense. And they had the worst DVOA, defensive DVOA since 2000. That included the Mike Nolan years, the Dennis Erickson years. I mean, it was an epically bad defensive performance. And I get it. He was missing some starters, but you have to remember, they still graded worse in DVOA than when we had Michael Wilhoit playing middle linebacker. Just think about that.
Yeah. Man.
I mean, so let's think about that. That you can say, yeah, he was missing a bunch of starters. I remember there was 49ers teams, I think it was 2004 or 2003, that the team was so injured that they were literally going into last games of the year signing guys off the street, because that's what all they could manage under to get, or as far as their salary cap situation. And they still weren't having games that were scored this badly in DVOA. Like, it was an epically bad performance by that defense under D'Amico Ryans against the Chiefs. It was as bad of a defense as we'd seen in over 2 decades. So because I had people respond to me on Twitter being like, well, he was missing 7 starters. I go, I don't think you're understanding how bad that defensive performance was. Like, this was worse than any defensive performance you saw from the 49ers in 2005. And if any of you remember how bad that defense was in 2005, that should wake you up to something. And they also, then if we go back to Robert Saleh, he had a very healthy defense. And he went in against Mahomes in the Super Bowl, and they gave it 21 points in the last 7 minutes of that game and lost the Super Bowl. Now, I know the offense had some issues. They had a lot of issues. The offense really, blew that game. I get it. Okay. But They still gave up 21 points in 7 minutes. And people say, well, is all Bosa got held on 3rd and 15. Yes, Bosa did get held. We also had Tarvarius Moore committed a pass interference in the end zone on Travis Kelce on a badly underthrown ball on 3rd and 10. People always forget about that. They always forget about that we had later in that drive, after that 3rd and 15, we had Kansas City in 3rd and 10 from like the 12-yard line. And Tarvarius Moore had a really bad pass interference penalty on Travis Kelce. And that gave them first and goal from the 1, and they scored a touchdown. That game would have been 13-20 coming out of that drive, and it changes the course of everything on that drive. Instead, it was 17-20. And then you had Richard Sherman got beat for like a 45, 50-plus yard bomb on the next drive, and they scored a touchdown. Then they gave up like a 40-yard touchdown run on the next drive. This wasn't just Bosa got held on 3rd and 15. I know he did, okay? And I know that the game probably changes if they call that thing. I understand that. The defense also had more opportunities in that game. They could have tightened up. They could have stiffened up more. So, look, Robert Saleh, the last time he was with the 49ers and they played the Chiefs, they allowed 21 points in 7 minutes. So, yes, Wilkes is not D'Amico and he's not Saleh, and that might actually be a decent thing for us coming into this game, because the last guy who sacked Patrick Mahomes 5 or more times was Steve Wilkes in 2018. So, look, we can bag on Wilkes all we want, but I think that's going to be an interesting one. Now, I'm going to dive into a lot of Kansas City's offensive tape. I haven't gotten there yet, but that's just kind of where that was coming from on Twitter, and it's kind of picked up some steam there. I do want to get to John Shoop's question here. He says, "Are the sacks and pressures more a result of their coverage, or do they have a very good balanced pass rush?" I will say yes, it's both. So here's what makes them so tough. They really put pressure on the offensive line, and the offensive line being on their assignments. They stress the offensive line so much. Spagnuolo, you can tell, comes from a defensive front background. So he really understands offensive protection packages, how to present things a certain way, and then, bring something off of that. And they can run the huge plethora of blitz packages they have, because they can keep most of them pretty simple on the back end, in that they're comfortable manning up, and they're very, very good on the outside as far as manning up. And that allows them to do so many things pressure package wise, because they can sit there and they can bring 5, and the way they present things, the way they'll peel off, they're going to end up being +1. Like, they can sit there with a middle help guy, and if your running back stays in the block to help pick up that extra rusher, they're going to bring the guy that's on the running back. If your tight end stays in to help bring up that guy, pick up that guy, they're going to bring the guy that's on the tight end. They really put you in a place where they're going to be +1 in the rush, where you're going to have somebody blocking air or somebody double teaming. And if you don't do that, then they're going to get Chris Jones one-on-one, and they're going to put him on one of your weaker link pass block guys. So, I expect them to put Chris Jones on Colton McKivitz a lot. Either that or Jake Brendel, and sit there and force these ways. Because if they put him on Colton McKivitz and we start trying to slide help or bring a tight end in to chip and release, they're going to sit there and come with some extra pressures to then bring an unblocked free guy. And then what they do is, on the outside, they match up so well. I mean, when I watched the Raiders tape, it wasn't just like Aiden O'Connell was playing this horrible game. He didn't play great, but it wasn't like he was just sitting there staring at open receivers all over the place. They would match up, and it was either their corners on Devontae Adams, and he would just get blanketed, and Jacoby Myers, he was getting blanketed. I mean, they are very good man coverage guys on the outside. So they bring all these different blitz packages. They present different things to your offensive line. They really stress their assignments. And so when the quarterback drops back, he's got 2 seconds to decide if he's throwing it to your number one receiver, who's then being blanketed. One-on-one, that's tough. And if he comes with some inbreaker stuff, they understand where their help is really well. They don't give up leverage away from their help. So what they can also do is they'll present these looks, they'll drop out, and they're going to sit there with they run a form of cover two that's more like 2-man quarters. So how it goes is they'll have 2 safeties deep to help, but they don't help deep into the outside. They'll sit really shallow over the middle of the field like a quarter safety. And so they help take away anything over the middle, almost like a double lurk, but a little bit deeper. And so they funnel everything to that kind of 12 to 16 yard range into the middle where that help sits. And they're so good on the outside. That's where they're giving you is deep outside. And they do this to everybody. People will say, yeah, they're going to come at Brock Purdy. So I'm almost say that because I almost feel like the narrative coming out of this game, if something doesn't go San Francisco's way, is going to be that the Chiefs were just daring Brock Purdy to throw it deep outside the numbers all game long, and he couldn't do it. No, they do this to everybody, like literally everybody, because that's the hardest throw to make as a quarterback, and their corners are right there on everybody. They do not give up a lot of passes that way. I saw the Raiders try and take that shot about 6 times, and they got 1 pass interference, and they had 5 incompletions, and they punted on all those drives. So, they want you to try and take those shots. They disrupt timing, and all that stuff that makes those real deep shots outside so hard to hit. So it's not just one thing. They do so many things to help that pass rush, and they'll bring 0 blitzes with as much as anybody, and they're so good at playing coverage on the back end. And then when you think you're gonna run all these pick and rub routes against them, they're so clean in how they'll pick these things up and how they disrupt and how they do it all. They really understand how offenses are going to try and attack them. So that's why I say in all of this, it really does come down to you have to run the ball.
Yeah, that kind of makes up for all of that stuff is you have Christian McCaffrey, who's just obviously the most dominant back in the league. And it's not even, I don't even know who second, third, and fourth is. It's so far down the mountain. And so there were some comments, run the ball, and sometimes we talked about what kind of Shanahan, what version of Shanahan do we need? Like the trick play where it's a double reverse and we find Debo wide open, or is it just no? Just this is the Super Bowl. Just run the ball, even if you get 4 yards per carry. That brings up 3rd and 2, and I like my chances on 3rd and 2. Like just
Mm-hmm.
do that. Like what? It can be frustrating sometimes.
Yeah, you're gonna see a lot of ugly runs, and Brock Purdy's gonna have to pick up yards with his legs.
Yeah.
That's gotta be there. I do not expect this to be a game where Brock Purdy throws it 30 times. If Brock Purdy is throwing the ball 30 times in this game, we're in a world of hurt. Now I do believe there's some plays that I've seen there that I think we can hit for some explosives. I'm gonna show those on my preview video that I think are there. But you would think, especially with the way that with how aggressive Kansas City is, and especially against a run, that the play action pass would be there. And so many people fall into that trap. They're going to think that, and then so teams will run play action and they'll come out of it. The quarterback turns his head back around, and guess what? They've sat there, and the corners and the safeties accounted for everything. They will understand your play action passes. Um, they're it's really impressive to see how that, because you'll see them sit there and attack hard on these outside zones, these wide zones, and you're sitting there going, okay, run a slide concept. It's going to be there. They're attacking so hard. Now you flow back the other way. And I would watch teams do that. They would then run a slide concept, and that quarterback goes to come out of that fake and roll out, and suddenly that corner picked up the guy out of the flat. The safety picked the guy on the corner, and the backside safety picked up the over. They sat there, they had their run fits, and then they immediately dropped into the landmarks of the passing offense. It was really impressive stuff, and you're going, "Oh, wow. Okay." I'm sitting there going, "I would have fallen for the same thing that offensive coordinator did," because it looks like it's there, and you think it's gonna be there, and they run it, and all of a sudden, oh, wait, they covered it. And now your quarterback is out there, and he's throwing an incomplete pass, or he's a little bit late on his throw, whatever it be. So yeah, it'll be a tough matchup. And for me, I think this comes down to what the title of the show is which Kyle Shanahan do the 49ers need in the Super Bowl? And it's kind of based off an interesting conversation I had with somebody last night. So I'll ask you, Adam, what do you think that means?
So, man, if I get the frog in my throat, see, I don't have coffee like you. I'm all natural, and plus, I'm reacting to everyone laughing at my hilarious comments. The Star Wars. Anytime someone, I will say,
It's a trap.
yeah, anytime someone is going to put something in the chat regarding Star Wars, I don't think you guys understand how I am like squirrel, and I'm just going to go into that for 5 minutes. Speaking of for 5 minutes, real quick, we do have to talk about the great Gonzo, who is lighting up the chat with all kinds of good banter and submits a super chat. So thank you for that. The beef from WOP worked and
White
was
Oak Pastures.
oh yes, yes, yes. Oh, so great, great. Okay. And was a party favorite, making my world famous nachos with them for the big game. Go Niners. Hashtag JD49. So this is a great time, probably real quick, to bring up White Oak Pastures because you always tell people to make sure that you comment in if you have received something from them and let us know, good or bad, how it went. And so a party favorite, it seems like, for, and I know your own wife was asking the chat what they're making. She's unsure of what they're going to have in your household for Super Bowl food. So maybe we talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I thought about trying to do a brisket, but I don't want to be that tired for the game. A brisket's a
It's a
big
lot.
deal. I mean, to because like I don't have one of the electric smokers. I'm really southern, and so I have a wood smoker for barbecue. It takes like 16 hours, and you stay up, 3/4 of the night to barbecue a brisket. Now it tasted amazing, but it's Super Bowl. I can't do that. I got to be alert. I can't handle this. So yeah, we're trying to figure it out. She wants to do the game day nachos. We've had it as like a tradition for most of our stuff to do game day nachos.
Yeah.
And so, I thought about that, but it's kind of a one shot deal. Those nachos, like they're pretty thick. They're pretty sizable. It's a big old plate of nachos, and so once you down that half like platter of nachos, you're done. Like there's no snacking left in the game. It's like, you know, I'm like a bear shot with a tranquilizer dart. Like
Yeah.
we need some ideas for some snack foods. Like Great Gonzo says, keep it to finger foods because it's a
Yeah.
long game. Yeah,
The
that's
Chex
what we're
Mix.
looking at. Is like we need some of those snack food ideas. That's what she's looking for. Things because yeah, you need to stress eat as you go.
Right,
And
right.
nachos are great, but like you get whoa, like just
Yeah,
packed
yeah.
full, and then you can't have anything. Um, but yeah, White Oak Pastures has been absolutely phenomenal. I'm a huge fan, not just because they're an affiliate. I love, love, love their products. I just made some tacos with their ground beef the other night. It was absolutely amazing. And then made some stuff with their ground beef. It was actually no, it was last afternoon, yesterday afternoon. I made a taco salad with their ground beef. It was amazing. The night before I made tacos, just absolutely fantastic. And they have a ton of great options from sausages. I love their chorizo sausage. It is absolutely out of bounds. Their
That
beef
means
is
good, right?
phenomenal, and it's a Guy Fieri thing. If you ever watch Diners, Drive-ins, and Dives, you'd be like, that is out of bounds. Um, and but it's not just really good food, it's really good for you. We've understood coming out of the pandemic how important things like vitamins and minerals are, not just from vitamin supplements, of things like vitamin D, that people are taking vitamin D supplements. Well, the best way to get vitamin D in your body is usually actually through a fat of some kind, a soluble fat. And one of the best sources of that is actually going to be from pasture raised pork. They're out in the sun. They sit in the sun. They soak up the vitamin D. It gets into everything. And when then you eat that protein, you get that into you. And it's one of the best sources of vitamin D. And we found that so important to your immunity health. And, things like vitamin E, which is so good for you. And that's what you get from grass-fed cows, from pasture-raised pork, from grass-fed lamb. And that's what all their stuff is. They're not only a great it's great tasting food, but it's really good for you. You feel better. You don't feel as heavy. For a long time in the food industry, they've done the marketing thing, which is sell you something cheaper and convince you it's better. And so they sit there and they're selling you meat by the pound, not by the cut. And so it's not about how good of quality that cut is. It's about how much of that cut they can get, because they're selling it to you by the pound. So they don't worry about how healthy is this animal, how good for you is this animal that they're raising. It's about getting that animal as big as they can, as fast as they can, because that turns the most profit. And White Oak Pastures takes a different route. They said, look, that's not a sustainable way. That's not a healthy way to raise things. We're not looking to create this animal to get it as big as possible, as fast as we can. They don't use they use no hormones. They don't alter the animals in any way. They live as these animals would instinctually. A cow is a rudiment animal. It wants to graze. And so they allow the cows to do that, and that's how they live. And they live off of things that are good for them and good for you in return. So check them out, whiteoakpastures.com/JD49, and you can get $20 off your first order of $150 or more. It comes packed there at the facility, frozen there, arrives to your door in a cooler packed in dry ice. It's absolutely amazing. So, yeah, it's just a great partners there, and great. Gonzo tried it out. It was a big hit, and I'll tell you, anything that I've given to anybody from White Oak Pastures, they've absolutely loved. I got a friend who's hunts a lot of deer. He bought some of their it was from their pork leaf lard, or pork leaf fat, excuse me, which is some of the fat trimmings off of the pork, and he gave it to his processor to mix in with his venison that he got in there, because you want to mix that in with some ground meats. On that venison is usually so lean it won't stick together, but it's a great way then that you get a really healthy fat infused in with that high quality protein of the venison. So that's an option there if you're a hunter, and I know around here it's a big deal. But when we talk about like Kyle Shanahan, that I had this conversation with a guy on Twitter last night, and he wouldn't leave me alone on it. I was like, dude, I'm trying to watch film. And he was sitting there. He's like, he started the conversation with I want to pull it up so that I have the exact words of what he said, because he pieced out on me this morning. He was like, all right, buddy, whatever. He said, I hope Kyle has some cojones and stop being conservative in this game. And I get the sentiment. Yeah, he said, I hope Kyle has some stones on him and stops being conservative in this game. And I get the idea. Okay, people will get real mad about conservative Kyle, and they want that, that shark kind of prey seeking Kyle Shanahan that's going to go after him and really,
You pick your spots, though.
try and
No?
jump on him over everything. Okay, and so it's. I get it. I get why people want that, but I also am like, that sounds very emotional in how you're talking, and it's not actually looking at how this game is going to match up. Because if you try and do that, you are playing right into Kansas City's hands. They would love for you to take some shots on first down. They really would.
Right.
Because they play a lot of soft zone on first down. And so they want to kind of like suck you into believing that you can take a shot on first down, because once you're in 2nd and 10, they have you right where they want you. That's when Spagnuolo is going to come with all these different looks, all these different ways of generating pressure, and they're going to man up, and they get to play how they want to play.
Right.
And then they're going to sit there on third down. They're going to show you, man. They're going to show you these pressure packages. They're going to back out, be in Tampa 2 zone. And that's what they love to do. And so, if you buy into that and you say, okay, we're going to really go for it, you're going to end up with 3 3-and-outs to start that game. And all of a sudden now you've let Mahomes have 3 shots at getting up 21-0 on you. And that's not where you want to be. And you don't
No.
want to be in that place against this defense. So I get the sentiment that we want Kyle to be aggressive and we want to put up 49 points and blow him out in the Super Bowl. I say you also have to understand who your opponent is, because this is a team that they lost their best run defensive lineman, that they have been a little bit more susceptible against the runs, but you have to commit to it because they're going to stop you for a 2-yard run a lot. There's probably going to be 10 to 12 2-yard runs in this game.
Yep.
So you have to accept that reality as a fan and say, okay, we're going to go in this game and it's going to be a dogfight very early on. Once the levee starts to break, that's when this game can start to separate. And this
So,
isn't.
question real quick on what we're talking about with offense. Here is my thought process, and you tell me if I am crazy or if this makes sense, because I see this when I watch. Is okay, let's say for the first 4 drives of the game, we start by handing the ball off either to Debo or Christian McCaffrey in very similar formations. And then on the 5th one, we play action and take a shot. That is to me where you're picking your spots, and where if you got enough yards gained in those first 4 drives on first down, meaning that the linebackers are being pulled, then you take your shot for a 38-yard gain to Ayuk on a deep cross. Am I crazy, or is that more, that's still, to me, that's still conservative? Is that more what we want from
Yeah,
Kyle?
what I think you're going to see is you're committed to the run and you have your checks in for very specific looks. If we get this look versus this front and this run defense, we're going to take this shot. And so we'll can to it. But if we don't get that look, we're running the ball.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, an
And that,
audible, yeah, is fair.
so there's, and Kyle Shanahan builds a lot of can calls into there. And, it goes something where you're going to have a run call, like, 18-0 can to, and then there's, it might be drift or it might be, whatever. There's going to be, there's these can to calls. And sometimes it's a pass to a run. Sometimes it's run to a run. Sometimes it's a run to a pass.
Right.
And it's all dependent on the look you have. And a lot of it's going to be game plan specific. So, for me, I'm looking at, you're only taking those shots if you absolutely get the look you want.
Right.
We tried to do that versus Green Bay very early on in that game. We got the look we wanted, and then there was a false start, and then
Yeah.
came out and tried to run the same
Same
play,
play.
didn't get the same look, and Brock Purdy still tried to force it in there. And that's what you can't do against this defense. You can't get yourself in there where you're at worst, you're 2nd and 10.
Right.
You need to have it where, okay, we do not get this absolutely specific look. We are running the ball. And I think the other way you need to do it is there's got to be a lot of misdirection runs. That is one area where they are a little susceptible. But you have to, either you start the game with misdirection and you use that to set up your base run game, or you start with your base run game and then you lead that into misdirection. One of the two has to happen. And that's what they're going to be spending, all last week trying to figure out, with a staff of 10 coaches trying to do. That's where people ask me, well, what are we going to do? And I say, well, I don't have a staff of 9 other people that we're pouring through this whole film. And, if I had that, maybe I could give you an answer. I'm also not Kyle Shanahan, but this is me in my mom and pop shop, trying to kind of look through it and see what is there. I do think that, again, there's going to be a couple shots that are available against specific load. Excuse me, against specific looks. And again, I'll show that on my preview video. But
Yeah.
overall, I was really impressed. I kind of came into the film kind of going, let's see what the big deal is about Steve Spagnuolo here. Because to me, everything that you hear is just, they're this man coverage team and they run man all the time. And, it's hard to, but then Steve Spagnuolo is getting all this credit. And I go, if you just have really amazing players that can lock up and man the whole game, like how is that really tough for hard for a defense coordinator? But then you really look into what he does and everything and all the problems he creates for an offense. You
Yeah.
know, real hats off to Steve Spagnuolo. I'm surprised he has not gotten more head coaching uh, buzz, considering, that, yeah, I know he didn't do great in New York there, but Dan Quinn just got hired again, and he failed there at the end in Atlanta. I know took them to Super Bowl, but Ron Rivera got a second chance. There's a lot of guys that get second chances. I'm just wondering what the deal is there with Steve Spagnuolo.
Yeah. One question about him then for sure that I have is Belichick famously has said on defense that he wants you to play left-handed. He wants to take away the number one. He can't take away all seven things that you like to do, but he'll like to take away the number one thing. And so my question then is, if Steve Spagnuolo is going to do that, first of all, do you see that that's the way that he coaches as well? And if so, is the number one thing then honestly Christian McCaffrey?
No, I wouldn't say that that Spagnuolo has that kind of Belichick style where, we're gonna like, Chad Ochocinco comes in and we're gonna double him all game and we're
Yep.
gonna take him away. That's not what I see. What you see is they play their defense and they play it
Okay.
really well. And they they're fast, they're aggressive, they fly to the ball, they want to fill their gaps hard. They don't want to let the offense come to them in the run game. They want to go to the offense in the run game. So you're going to see, right before the snap, there might be a linebacker who's off the ball, and he'll run up right before the snap and get in the gap between the center and the guard. They're not sitting there playing around and saying, we're going to make you guess of what gaps we're playing. We're playing these gaps and we're going to fill them really hard, and we're going to get to them before you do. They do that kind of stuff, and they'll sit there, and then sometimes they'll sit there and present a running back over here and then over there and then back over here, and they'll kind of move around sometimes. Then other times they don't move at all. And then sometimes they'll not move at all, and they're going to have a scrape exchange going. They come at you with a lot of stuff. And what it does is it kind of reminds you of, if you think about how Brian Flores is in Minnesota, that he blitzes all the time. Okay, blitz more than anybody in the league. And why does he do that? Because and he'll do this, and he'll show and come with 6 and 7 man pressures more than anybody in the league. And then he'll turn around and drop 8 in coverage more than anybody in the league. It's really extremes. And what that does is that wears down a quarterback mentally throughout the game. Is that every single snap, you cannot be certain that what you see and what's presented is what you're going to get. And
Yeah.
you may have to hold that ball for 3.5 seconds. You may have to get it out in 1 second. And that constant wear and tear on a quarterback of that, pushing their mind and stressing them like that, and forcing them, you see it wear quarterbacks out throughout a game. Is that because they have to constantly see it right. They can't just predetermine anything pre-snap, because he may sit there and show you man, and you have that 10-yard out, and then he may show you that same look, and the next time you drop back, that corner's going into a cloud coverage, and if you throw that same ball, you're throwing a pick six. And now you've got to move on really quickly. And if you don't, you're getting sacked, and the drive is most likely ended. Like, he sits there and wears a quarterback down. What Spagnuolo does is that kind of a thing, but for offensive lines. It sits there and wears them down, because they sit there and they can't be certain that this guy being right here is going to be blocking in this gap every time. He really wears offensive lines down that way. It's like a mental wear down. And you kind of, if you go back and watch the Super Bowl from 2019, and I've watched the film on that, the offensive line really, really struggled there the last 7 minutes of that game. And I know Jimmy missed some throws, he missed some receivers, and I'm glad we have Brock Purdy going into this game. But we use Jimmy as, he was the guy at fault. When you look at the offensive line was having some massive protection issues. They were having some serious run blocking issues. And again, it's that wear you down all game. So the offensive line has to go into this game, and that can be where this offensive staff can get the offensive line prepared for that, because we don't have a single offensive lineman on this team that was there in 2019. And so be ready for this. Like, you have to go into this game understanding that this is going to be a mental fight from beginning to end, and it wears guys down. So, that's how I would say that the Spagnuolo's defense is there. He puts that strain on that offensive line all game long.
That'll be very interesting to see. The We talked about the moxie of Brock Purdy, and if he's up for 4 quarters of dealing with the defense. And I think the some of the players that on offense that were on the team back when we played Kansas City before. I mean, I just feel like Debo is a much different animal
And
than
being used in a much different way.
yeah. What so I just it's gonna be so fun to see. It's gonna be the biggest chess match is not, in my opinion, Andy Reid versus Shanahan, but you think it's Spagnola, right? Versus Shanahan.
Yeah, the Bills had some success early on against the Chiefs by putting Stephon Diggs in the backfield. One that made things a little bit easier for Josh Allen, because it gave you a clear, their running zone, their running man, really clear. And two, that kind of gets them out of, we're knowing that this run is coming right here, because it could be Josh Allen going that way. I would love to see McCaffrey and Debo in the backfield, on some 11 personnel sets, to be able to do some things, because I think that'll give you some real defined looks there for Purdy. For one, which is a struggle against this Chiefs defense, and then two, you have the ability now where the defense, you can put Purdy in shotgun, give him that kind of open view to scan, and then but it doesn't give the defense a clue into, okay, if McCaffrey's on Purdy's right, it's so much harder to run that way. They got to take the snap, and then it's maybe a toss. It's not this bang bang, and it's so much harder to run your play action to, like, if you a run to your right, it's really hard to fake that run to the right and then come with a play action pass. Whereas, and most of the time you're going to get, a handoff that's coming up in the middle or to the left if the running back's to the right of Purdy. And so now if you have Debo and McCaffrey there, you have the run can come either way.
Yeah.
Debo might be your lead blocker. McCaffrey might be a lead blocker. You might fake McCaffrey up the middle, and you're going to turn and hand it to Debo, who's on an end around. That's what I want to see. I want to see a lot of that. I think if there's an opening for something like that, that's where it's going to be.
They both can go for a pass on a Texas route, or is also
Exactly,
or a screen.
choice routes against man coverage, all that
Oh
kind of
man,
stuff.
that's so that's the nerd. That's how I play Madden. Just put them both in the backfield, and now the defender has no idea. But obviously, this isn't Madden. But yeah, basically, the chess match though is real, and we're excited for this again this whole week. Make sure you just enjoy this week, guys. Watch as much of NFL Network and all that, all the interviews, the Sports Center, like whatever, all that stuff is like. Get a chance to watch it and just exhale a little bit and enjoy, because there will be plenty of time to be nervous. There will be. So let's just take a lot of this week and enjoy that. Hey, we are a part of something very cool as the Niner faithful. Speaking of being a part of that, remember the best way to be a part of this little community is to walk up to someone that is wearing Niner gear, even if you've never met them before, and say, "Hey, man, are you a Niner fan? I see you're rocking the, you know, whatever jersey or," and show them your phone, show them the channel, and click on one of your favorite podcasts or video breakdowns like the Brock Purdy for MVP, any one of those videos that Johnny has done, and explain when we do the podcast and stuff like that. Also, be sure to check out JFA49.com. I'm excited for the off season. Hopefully, we'll be coming off a Super Bowl victory in this off season. The reason I'm excited though is because I know Johnny will be devoting some time to the website regarding the different film and different breakdowns that he will do. I can't wait to talk ideas with him and regarding that and the podcast moving forward. So be sure to show people that that's the number one way to support. It's how we've gotten, you know, I think when I started with the podcast last year, you were around 15,000 or 16,000 subscribers around. And to see that we're getting close to 22 and a half, like, is so awesome in a year. And so I know I played a half of a 1% of that. I'm just happy to get a front row seat. But remember to again share with your friends, let people know that, hey, this guy breaks down film. This channel is all about the whys and hows of the game. Remember, we will come to you. I don't know, Johnny. We still have to figure that out for our last podcast before the actual Super Bowl. Well, we'll dive in a little bit more into some film, I think, right? Is that what you want
Yeah,
to do?
most likely Friday. Yeah, I
Yeah.
have to get through I know a couple people had some questions about Kansas City's offense. I haven't dived into their film yet. Like I said, I was on the road with the Senior Bowl. With super slow hotel Wi-Fi. Like it would take, for example, 2 hours to download one like the defensive side from Buffalo. It took over 2 hours to download. And so then traveling and all that stuff. And I've been diving into films, some Saturday, some yesterday, got through 3 games. Have one more game I need to watch through for the defensive side. Then I'm going to get to the offensive side and start watching that through. And so I'll be able to speak more on their offense at the end of this week. And we'll give kind of our final Super Bowl uh thoughts and breakdowns and all that stuff. And
Yep.
then my wife and I are having a date to ourselves on Saturday. So that's off the charts there. We need some time in a
Yes.
peaceful environment before the stress of Sunday. She knows me that this is going to be one of the most stressful 12 hours of my life. So it'll be good though.
We get it. So yes, and we love Dawn that she allows you to hang out with the faithful, and she's part of the faithful, of course. So yeah, that'll do it for us for today. Remember, we'll come to you probably Friday. Make sure that your notifications are turned on, guys, so that we don't want you to miss being a part of one of the most anticipated, exciting podcast that we'll do in a long time will probably be this Friday. So make sure your notifications on. Make sure you share with family and friends, and stay safe and stay healthy. And until then, go Niners.